Since when on earth did your quirk give you so much grief that the mere smell of it gave you such a splitting headache? You laid in bed, happy to have a room of your own after the move to this deserted isle off the coast of Musatafu. Still, the constant sunlight wasn't helping the situation. You groaned while you dug your head in your pillow, hoping that would help ease the sting from the sunlight that shone through the windows. You didn't know how this headache transpired and where it came from. It felt like you slammed into a brick wall.
It's a part of the process,
explained that familiar voice who sat by your bedside, his eyes staring down at you away from his console.
This is excruciating,
you mumbled before you peeked out from your pillow, staring into Shigaraki's red gaze.
It'll pass.
Tough love. That was what this was. Not that you hadn't experienced it once upon a time. You tossed in bed, turning to face Shigaraki while he continued to focus on whatever game he was playing. The one thing you were gracious for was that he had the volume played low. That didn't help the button mashing, though.
How long?
You asked while you pressed against the soft pillows.
Who knows?
He replied, eyes still on the console.
It's been hours.
You'll survive it.
I meant the level you're playing.
Shigaraki paused his game, turning to you, your eyes shut but still facing him on the bed.
You've been playing the same level since you've sat here with me,
you explained, tossing while you tried to make yourself comfortable with this throbbing headache in your brain. You continued to breathe, hoping to focus away from the wave of pain that stabbed at your temples, but you heard nothing from Shigaraki. You wondered if you dozed at some point, unable to compare how time felt anymore until a palm wrapped a few of his fingers around your hand, careful with his touch.
I'm waiting for you,
explained Shigaraki, caressing his thumb across the top of your hand.
It's no fun to play ahead without you, Pixie.
His fingers, despite being gloved, delicately held onto your hand, watching while your fingers gently wrapped around his, and a smile pulled on your face. He held you for a while, wondering if you had dozed again despite the light grip of your fingers. He was careful not to fully embrace you.
Can I get some aspirin?
You mumbled after the quiet, soon feeling his hand leave yours. It was a long wait until Shigaraki had his team player back.
Pup,
called a malformed voice in your head. These dreams pressed and prodded your brain, and that voice sounded like him. But not him.
pup.
A few times it contorted into that low and husky verbatim you were familiar with. But something else, or someone else, was getting into the mix. There was only confusion, and it only stung your head.
Biscuit?
That voice, that was a lifetime ago. Or was it more than a lifetime? Delusions of the mind that suffered from the pain and ran on any form of survival. You stared at your arms, covered in the burns that contorted your skin until flashes of bandages replaced them. Hallucinations. That's all they were, you thought, trying to convince yourself otherwise. You squint your eyes from the pain that raced across your face, your forehead seizing to and fro as if it would cave in on itself. Tossing and turning on the bed in itself was almost self-inflicting, finding your gaze turned to the open windows that overlooked the vast landscape of flowers towards the ocean ahead. It was a beautiful sight, showered with the casting light of the sun up high, and it only burned in your eyes. Dehydration, the doctor said. Overexertion of your quirk did have a downside after all, but none to this extent that resulted in these painful and awful headaches that crushed your skull. Your escapades through the city with Dabi felt like a hangover of massive proportions, and you hardly had a drink. The bed bounced from another weight at its edge that recoiled your head into your body, feeling that slight inertia smack in your brain. It was only saved by the large hand that laid atop the crown of your head, the small staples rippling through your hair while he gently patted, his fingers gripping against your skull. It almost tickled, sending shivers down your spine.
Have you eaten?
Asked that low, husky voice, his hand still on your head.
I'm barely awake.
You slowly spoke, peering up at his tall frame that sat before you on the bed. Dabi's ice blue gaze stared down at you, unemotional and unmoving, until the clink of glass caught your eye, along with aspirin, to your surprise.
Was able to take a few from the dock.
He explained, still with his hand caressing your hair.
Come on, Pipsqueak.
The grip of his fingers helped pull you up from the bed, sitting up to take a couple capsules. The want of thirst had never hit you so hard than now, while you felt the taste of mere water satisfying. Perhaps the doctor was right to say it was dehydration, but the sting in your temples still persisted.
Thanks,
you weakly muttered, turning to lay back in bed, only to feel that grip on your head pull you in. You succumbed to it, finding yourself now on Dabi's chest before he pulled you further onto his lap, cradling you within his embrace. Too weak to resist, you embraced his hold, laying by the crook of his neck while his hand still held you. You felt like you dozed while you heard his breath and his heat permeate through his skin. It was oddly soothing and comforting while it eased the pain that attacked your skull. In fact, the way he handled you and how tender he was reminded you of...
Get well, little one.
He spoke, his lips caressing the top of your scalp while his fingers rhythmically massaged through your hair. These old walls were slowly coming together, thanks to a few cleaners you were able to procure to sweep away the dust that collected over the years of disuse. However, today was not a day for any unwanted visitors. You laid atop one of the old couches that still stood amongst the old meeting room. You couldn't care less that it was years old. It did not surpass the looming headache that arose out of nowhere. A light groan escaped your throat while your arms provided the headrest, dozing in and out of focus. You've sent your splinter group off on their errands to further any future plans, which only left you with one other present in the empty halls of his once humble abode. Footsteps echoed behind you, waking you from whatever doze you succumbed to moments ago to feel a presence loom over your shoulder. You felt a shiver down your spine, all too familiar with the feeling of his eyes glazing over you.
Why are you here?
Crowed a deep voice from above. You slowly turned onto your back, looking up into Chisaki's golden gaze staring down at you from behind the couch.
Resting,
you simply replied, squinting from the pain that shot through your temples.
Are you sick?
He questioned, his eyes judging.
Just a headache. It'll pass.
You hoped it was reassurance you displayed despite the excruciating shot of pain across your forehead. Any sign of illness was deadly in front of the former Yakuza leader. You knew this, despite finding some leniency in this perspective while he was in Tartarus.
And your people?
He continued to question, his voice trailing around the couch.
Doing their jobs.
You replied concisely. The less words you could utter, the less pain you had to endure to even think. Every fiber in your being attempted to keep your hands at bay from gripping your skull. But soon the tender touch of fingers gripped your head, running through your hair. There before you, kneeling by the dirty couch, was Chisaki, his only gloved hand almost massaging into your temples. It took you by surprise, if not for the rhythmic motion of his thumb becoming a saving grace from the throb in your head. His hands shifted across your head and soon gripped the back of your neck, holding you in the palm of his hand. You stared at his arm, covered in the blackened scars of the doctor's work. It was a nightmarish sight, one that you were familiar with before Chisaki received his share.
Those months in Tartarus, did you mean every word when you said you wanted to right the world?
He asked, his golden eyes staring straight through you.
Yes,
you reluctantly and weakly answered.
It's been my purpose.
You watched Chisaki analyze you, a mind game he would play while you visited him in Tartarus. But everything you've told him had been truthful. You learned from the best that the truth was always the best course of action. Soon enough, Chisaki released his hand and his gaze from you, perhaps ending this interrogation, you thought.
If you're able to stand on your feet, join me in my room.
He offered, garnering your attention.
You need a proper bed to man your army. Don't you, Major?
He was becoming too comfortable with the name, you thought, before you watched him leave you by the couch. His footsteps disappeared into the distance, now leaving you in the quiet again. This came as a shock. He invited you to his room? You'd expect to wallow on the couch for a while longer. But Chisaki offered his bed. Perhaps there was more to the man than you originally thought, despite the cruelty he inflicted during his younger years. All of the thinking brought on another rack of pain to your skull, now contemplating quickly on your choices. It didn't take long for you to make the weak walk to his room, the only one that was dressed with new and clean furniture. A weak knock gave you entry inside, standing before Chisaki, who stared down at you. You could have sworn that there was a smile behind those eyes, but not before you fainted into his chest, your head heavy and your legs weak.